Hello and welcome to Peace Propaganda, a twice-weekly show about living peacefully. This is Adam, and my co-host Becky is not currently in the studio. She's not in the Unicorn Double Rainbow Peace Propaganda studio, but we recorded an interview earlier with Mike Margolis from the Walking the Earth podcast. He's currently in Thailand, but he took about an hour out of his day to meet with us via Skype, and we recorded a little bit of an interview, and so we wanted to share that with you today. I want to remind you that the show is twice weekly, so be sure to subscribe. You never know what you might be missing. We had a lot of fun on the Wednesday episode, and you can find us on iTunes, on Stitcher. If you look in the show notes, we have the RSS feed, so you could subscribe via any podcast listening device that you please. And of course, we are on Twitter at Peace Podcast. We're actually hosting a little bit of a contest on Twitter against the Walking the Earth podcast, but you'll hear more about that during the show. We encourage you to check that out on the Twitter feed. But without further ado, here's the interview. I hope you like it.
Don't worry, be happy. Ain't got no place to lay your head. Somebody can.
We are here with Mike Margolis from the Walking the Earth podcast. Hello, Mike.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being on.
So Mike is actually a friend of mine from childhood. It's an interesting story. In high school, we lived on the same street or lived in the same neighborhood. And then I kind of feel like our lives, in some ways, though separate, took some similar parallel paths.
I think so.
Yeah, because we've kind of ended up in a similar intellectual spot in some ways.
It seems like it. Yeah, I was listening to a little bit of the show, but for the benefit of the listeners, Mike, could you maybe just give us the the rundown of what your show's about, what you try to do with the show?
Yeah, definitely. So on my show, basically, the brief summary of my story is I was working an engineering job for 5 years, got fed up with doing that corporate life, blah, 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 left my job in August, and I've been walking the earth since. The show started off of me telling about my travels, but then that kind of got stale of me talking about myself. So actually what we do nowadays is I talk to other travelers or people who are doing things related to backpacking, and just try to get people's stories and share them, and what I try to do with this show is just maybe present the stories that I never got, because growing up it was always a certain script of what you're supposed to do to live a life.
Right.
Yeah, and growing up in that middle class suburban America, it was sort of, okay, you go to college, go get a job, kids.
Yeah, that's a common theme that we talk about over here at Peace Propaganda. So that's interesting. Yeah, so as Becky was saying before you mentioned that, you guys seem to have taken a similar track in life.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to one of your recent episodes, and there were a few of them that really hit a chord with me. The one that was called Let Go was really nice. It was this idea of, let go of control a little bit. And that's sort of been a theme of my travel. As a backpacker, that's the thing you do is you have to accept a little bit of chaos and embrace it. And then you had another one, I Want to See You Be Brave, and that really also struck a chord with me. It's this idea of do the things that you're afraid of. And Becky and I have had a few conversations over IM and whatnot since then that have been nice. I think we relate to different aspects of, say, Buddhist philosophy and that kind of thing, and have integrated those. Yeah,
I was saying to Adam, actually, that in a lot of ways we've taken similar paths and are very similar, but then in some other ways we're almost sort of polar opposites, I feel like, because I'm obviously not traveling the world. I basically got to where I am intellectually and, if you want to say spiritually, whatever, by
that word works, I think.
Yeah, by sitting in a studio apartment by myself, which is sort of like the polar opposite of what you've done. Travel. Yeah,
and the word spiritual, I think that word some people get a reaction to that word, but to me that word is just like the internal journey.
Exactly.
And so, and that's nothing to do with God or anything like that. It's about yourself. So you can get that traveling the world, or someone who's less capable like me require traveling to get to that level.
Yeah.
Whereas you can maybe do it better just from being at home, and you can get there the same way. A different way, get to the same place.
Yeah, everyone's different, and that's why it's an internal thing, right? You have to just listen to what your body is telling you and follow that instead of following sort of the commands of other humans. follow the commands that are coming from you.
Exactly. And, it's a thing that, actually, it's an interesting point. Something I've personally been trying to make better about myself is, for me, this was this was the path, was I had to leave this job. I had to go traveling. And I think there was a part of me that wanted to like shout out to the world, like, hey, everybody, this is the better way. But I think over time I've come to, I think I always knew this, but really act on it. That no, this is a way that works for me. It's not necessarily everyone's path, though. And it's not for me to say what anyone's path is. All I try to do, for example, in my show, is just show, here's some options, here's some other perspectives from as diverse of amount of people as I can. And then, hey, everyone else, you decide your own path, really. So
I love what you do with the show in that regard.
Thank you.
Of course. The last episode that I heard, you were in Thailand, if I'm not mistaken. Are you still in Thailand?
I am still in Thailand. I'm in the north of Thailand in a city called Chiang Mai, where we just had their Thai New Year. So it was a big water fight in the streets of Thailand for actually more than that, 4 days.
That sounds like a blast.
It was possibly the best event I've ever participated in.
Wow. High praise. So
yes.
How do you find yourself in a place in Thailand? Why there? Why there and not somewhere else?
Well, I guess I've been moving along. My first stop was actually, after Burning Man, first stop out of the country was India. And I spent 4 months traveling around India. And maybe it was that spiritual thing.
If I had a choice, that's probably where I would start too.
Yeah, and India is definitely not the easiest place to go backpacking, but I had done enough of short trips. When I used my whole 2 weeks of vacation per year when I was working that job to do some backpacking trips and train myself a little bit. But yeah, maybe it was that spiritual aspect of India. For some reason, it was just kind of calling to me. So that I just followed that, like we were just talking about. You just follow what's calling to you.
Yeah. I hear you.
And then my visa expired for India, and my cousin had a semester off, and he wanted to see Thailand, and I also wanted to see Thailand. So it worked out that I met him here. I actually left Thailand when my visa expired in February, went around a couple other countries nearby, Laos and Cambodia, and kind of circled back because of Songkran, because of the big water fight, basically. I heard about a big water fight in Thailand and I couldn't resist, basically. So that's the reason I'm here. This one's a less spiritual reason. It's just to be in a water fight.
Yeah, but like,
that sounds like a perfect reason to be anywhere.
And again, like you said, I don't feel like spirituality is like about some god or whatever. It's about whatever's calling you.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. It's about, and I think this is something you guys have talked about on your show. It's about following what's calling you. And doing the thing that is doing it for you, and not because some other external structure is telling you this is the way to be.
Yeah.
It's telling you this is the script to follow. Not following it for your parents or for your friends, or following it the thing that is you.
Right. Not following it for society. Yeah. And like you're saying what was calling me was this big water fight in the middle of Thailand. But the reality of that is that to you it was fun that was calling you, right? And I think society tells us a lot of times that if you're having fun,
you're not an adult.
or you're like doing something wrong or something, or not being productive or something. It's just always this focus on being
shaming.
Productive.
Yeah.
Go
fun
ahead.
shaming and the idea fetishizing busyness.
Yeah.
Is something that is absolutely pervasive in American culture.
Yes, I've gotten the reaction from people before. I put something on Reddit about backpacking, and someone said, "Why don't you stop the glorified Boy Scouting and go do some real work?" Ugh. And like, this is actually a comment I got on Reddit,
right.
And I was like, "Wow, it's really easy to do that, of course, behind a keyboard."
Right.
Yeah. Well, and people get
somebody angry at their own life.
Yeah, exactly. When
well,
people are
actually, it's funny because I looked at his other posts. I was just curious because there was a part of me that wanted to respond, right. But this is an example where I just held back because I realized there's nothing good that will come of me fighting someone on the internet. I just looked at his profile real briefly and saw everything he posts is just negative.
That's how it goes.
And I don't need to even engage with somebody like that.
Right.
For me, it's like I'm just going to step back and not even why even make a conflict there? You know, just
What I've learned is that when I start to engage those people, what happens is I get dragged down to that sort of feeling space, and I feel negative,
yeah.
and I just don't, and I'm tired of like abusing myself in that way, I guess.
Yeah, and it's difficult sometimes. I mean, I still fail all the time. Even the other day, I was out with some friends we were out drinking, and for some reason, someone said like a kind of a dick comment to me, and this was an example where I maybe was the beers that are part of it. You know, I responded just saying something dick-like back to him. Sorry, do you curse? Sorry,
No,
I don't mean to curse
it's
in your
cool.
show.
Please.
No censorship
Cool.
here.
Good. I would expect you're a free speech podcast.
That's right. This is the internet. Not too much censorship.
Yeah, exactly. But that was an example of a time where I didn't necessarily do what I should have done. But in that situation, next time I saw him, I kind of said, hey, sorry for being
That's
fake.
great. That's great. And you know what I love about that story is that so few people would ever have any retrospection on that event and think to themselves like, how could I have reacted better? How could I have reacted differently? Was there anything that I did in that situation that maybe made it less productive? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that ties into what I've heard of your philosophy, certainly my philosophy, and what I know of Becky's philosophy of, just trying to be the best you that you can be, not just, internally as far as it relates to your own emotional understanding of the world, but also how you impact others. And I think that's a very attractive philosophy to probably a lot of listeners. Can you maybe explain how, your journey to that realization of how it became important to you to have a retrospective and an introspective look on your life? Was there anybody influential in your life? Books, philosophers, an uncle, an aunt, anything like that?
Well, in my case, I would point to two very important life events. The first of which was in September of 2012 when I went to Peru. I was still working my engineering job at the time, and I was unhappy. I had it all on paper. I had a good job, a good career, and the things you're supposed to want. And I went to Peru, spent some time with a shaman, and did ayahuasca, which is a powerful, I guess you call it psychedelic medicine. And that was the first thing that said, hey, go backpacking. It also unlocks this very introspective side. I think it was always there, but it kind of sent it into overdrive. And then since then, in India, I actually did a 10-day Vipassana meditation course, which is kind of where you are in silence for 10 days and basically just meditating the whole time. And that experience was also, I would say, pretty transformative for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That sounds very intense.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that latter event that you're talking about. So you're silent for 10 days. Now, in those 10 days, you just sort of go about your life riding the bus, or are you like in a monastery or something?
Yeah. So you're in kind of they call it an ashram, but yeah, kind of like a monastery sort of thing. You're there for 10 days, and they provide your food and everything, but you're living there. So, but your day is consisting of, you kind of wake up and you meditate, then you eat some breakfast, then you meditate some more, then you eat some lunch, and then you meditate some more, and then you eat some dinner and you meditate some more. But while you're fighting with yourself to, oh my God, my back is killing me. Oh my God, I can't concentrate. Fighting with all the thoughts that are coming up now. But okay, what was really interesting for me, that I think was a weird way I grew, was it was kind of in contrast to the teachings in a odd kind of way. I was really into it on day one because their whole thing was, all right, this isn't about any religions or any dogma. This is about the internal journey. And I was digging it, because that was my brand of spirituality. And I was so into this thing. But as the days went on, day 5, day 6, and I don't know this is the case with every single one of these 10-day meditations, but in this particular one, the teachings became more and more dogmatic. Whereas on day 1, he was saying, oh, it's such madness to make the religions with their promises of heaven and threats of hell. Day 6, he's talking about, oh, follow this, you'll get enlightenment. and if you don't, you're going to be reincarnated into another life of misery. And I'm thinking,
Yeah,
all
right.
heaven, hell, enlightenment, misery. Wait, aren't you saying the same thing? And it just became more and more dogma. And that's, for me, I looked at this teacher as a dark mirror of myself. Because here's a guy, he was even legitimately trying to help people. Yet he was coming at it from this angle of, I know what's best. I know the way. Follow me, I know the way. And I was like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't, even if it goes back to what I'm, with the,
I don't want to follow anyone, right?
yeah, I don't want to follow anybody, and I don't want to pretend to be that someone who knows the way for anybody else either. I can't go around with my own ego saying, hey, I know what's best for you. I know what's for me, what I need to do, but it's not in my place to preach to anybody else or anything like that.
That's kind of the thing I feel about these like spiritual gurus or any kind of guru or anyone really who claims to be able to teach you anything of value to your life. Because the reality is that the only way that you learn that stuff is through listening to yourself. It's self-knowledge, right? It's not learning somebody else's self-knowledge. That's not useful. It's not useful to me to know what this guru's path. Well, okay, it could be useful to know what someone else's path was just to sort of be aware that everybody has their own different path and, nobody has the same path. But as soon as they start saying, follow me, it's kind of like, no, that's not the path.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like what you're describing dovetails with anarchist philosophy as I understand it. And the idea there being it's important to give people the tools to achieve what they want, not to tell them what they want.
Right. And, I think I spent way too much time being aggravated about how, this teaching is bullshit. He's spitting, this is just a religion. And this whole thing just became a religion on itself. Whereas maybe I would have been better if I just took what I liked from the teachings, rejected what I didn't, and didn't spend my mental energy focusing on that negative thing. So that's where teachers can come in handy. They can teach you things, but just don't accept them blindly. And if you don't agree with something, okay, I think it's just
let it go.
Yeah, exactly. Let it go and take the things that are good.
Right, because I mean, those people are free to believe however they believe, right? And so you don't need to like battle against their belief system. It's not going to help anyone. I forget exactly what the quote is, but it's something like being angry at someone is just poisoning yourself.
I mean, the guy in the videos is dead. That just like really nails it there, right? It's like, here I was, and I'm inside. I'm not even talking to anybody. It's all in my own head. Here I am fighting in my own head with a dead guy. And that was kind of like, what am I doing here? Like,
and it's so funny because I think, that's what most of us do in life. We kind of fight these ghosts in our head and imagine them to be real. And what happens when we do that is we tend to manifest that out into the external world. And so I think that's how we end up in these wars and things like that, because we're all sort of internally battling ourselves instead of just kind of like allowing whatever is to be.
I couldn't agree more. We create our own enemies. The U.S. has always had boogeymen, right? Whether it was the communists or the terrorists, there's always a boogeyman to fight.
Right.
So it's sort of like, we literally create our own enemies. And by fighting, for example, the war on terror, going into these countries where we are not, we weren't invited, it's sort of, you're creating the grounds that created this in the first place, sort of. So I think it does very much relate back to the same kind of things, Started off,
Are these, so you're very critical of U.S. foreign policy. Is that something that you went into walking the earth with, or is that something that you went into your new life of backpacking with, or is that something that, sort of became revealed to you through this journey?
I guess it's hard to say where there's a firm start. I think my political views over time have slowly. My family growing up is very conservative, and so it was the kind of thing where every single Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas or whatever, any family gathering, it would always delve into political discussions where it was against the liberals, blah blah blah, and
Right.
and so, and there are aspects of conservatism that I do agree with, but over time, as I found, it's say in college where it starts, where I start to spend more time away from my family and with people I choose to be with, or just being exposed to new ideas in general. And then I would say, certainly since traveling, my views on this world have changed drastically. Seeing the United States from the external perspective, that's definitely been a big contributing factor. There's a lot of weird shit that we do.
I want to take this opportunity to tell you about Sean's Outpost, a homeless outreach program which has provided over 20,000 meals to the homeless in Northwest Florida. They're also funded entirely through Bitcoin donations. They are proving that we can address the problems in our community without the state, without its predatory welfare programs, and without its Ponzi money. Recently, Sean's Outpost launched its newest, boldest initiative, Satoshi Forest, a 9-acre homeless sanctuary where they are teaching permaculture, aquaponics, and self-sufficiency to the homeless residents. No one sticks a gun in anyone's face and makes them donate to Sean's Outpost, and yet, every day, people do. Please consider donating to this inspiring cause. Visit seansoutpost.com. That's SEANS outpost.com.
So for anybody who's been sort of following us on Facebook, you'll know that we have decided that we'd like, between our two podcasts, Walking the Earth and Peace Propaganda, we'd like to do a little bit of a fun bet kind of thing.
The gauntlet has been thrown down.
So we're looking for some input. And Mike, if you want to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, well, I some other backpackers I met recently they actually worked for Virgin Airlines, told me about a bet that the Virgin Group CEO, Richard Branson, made and lost with the CEO of AirAsia. They had both had bet on a Formula One car or something, and the Richard Branson from Virgin Group's car lost. So his penalty was he had to dress like a female flight attendant on an AirAsia flight. And so in the spirit of that bet, I set out a challenge to the Peace Propaganda folks here, Becky and Adam, and but I guess I don't know what exactly the specifics are. We cannot. I'll ask my audience as well for ideas, but I guess we're looking for any ideas what to bet on. Maybe it's we each have World Cup teams, maybe, or we compete on Podcast Land votes next month, or
that sounds interesting. Good way. Although I will say they're like, I don't know, their counting system doesn't seem to be very like stable.
Yeah, the numbers jump up.
Yeah,
it does. Maybe we might have to ask like the dude who runs it, like for the actual count or something.
Yeah,
he might find this as a fun little thing. Also,
yeah.
So he could be happy to get involved.
There you go.
And penalties also, I guess. I don't know what the penalty should be for this. So,
I mean, if any audience members are listening and want to, make us do embarrassing things,
that's right, Peace Propaganda
let
listeners.
us know.
You are on notice. We're calling you out, and we're calling on you to give us some recommendations for this bet. So we look forward to whatever you can throw our way on Twitter or Facebook or all of that.
My co-host Castle had some thoughts of maybe the loser has to dress like a Power Ranger and go around in a public park promoting the other show.
Oh man, that's awesome! I would totally be up for that.
He also was saying maybe someone on the losing team has to shave their head. I nominate him for that, though. I don't want to do that because I'm trying to get long hair now for the first time in my life.
Yeah, I feel like anything that involves sort of like modifying the body is off limits because everybody has their own personal goals.
Yeah.
But you were saying the perspective from outside of the U.S. is that we do really weird stuff.
Yeah.
And I was saying that on Facebook, I saw a guy from the U.K. Who was commenting on, who had made like one of those sort of pithy, kind of witty lists of things, basically 20 things that whatever, you know,
like a BuzzFeed.
yeah, and what the theme was things that are weird about Americans that they don't realize are weird, basically. And one of them, the one that really resonated with me, was that we have our kids say the Pledge of Allegiance in schools.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say to you, actually.
Yeah.
That's the exact example I was going to give you.
Super creepy.
I was talking to like a girl from Norway a couple weeks ago, and I was just explaining, like, from age 5 to 18, 5 days a week, we start every single day by standing up, putting our hand over our heart, and saying, "I pledge my allegiance to this flag, this nation under God."
Right.
And we say this every day, every single day, 5 days a week at least. And she kind of looks at me like, "Wow, that I know another country that does stuff like that. North Korea."
Yeah, right.
How about it?
And I was just like, wow, that gave me perspective.
And then
Yeah.
people in the U.S. will look at you like you're a crackpot when you even hint that there's any propaganda happening in the schools. Like you may as well be Alex Jones or you know, just like totally like off the wall, off the spectrum politically, if you suggest that the school system has any agenda whatsoever.
You know, my personal experience with the pledge is I have a really strong memory of being taught, you know, what maybe it was like first grade or whatever, when they actually taught us the words to it. But I don't think they gave us the words like to read. They just like said the words and we followed after.
Yeah.
And I remember not being sure exactly what the teacher was saying. So she was saying, like, you know, the part that goes,
One nation under God.
no, the for which it the republic, something like the republic
to
for
this
which
republic
for which it stands. Yeah, and I was like,
Yeah.
what is a which it stand? And so like that's just what I thought the words were, and I was just always saying it that way because I had no idea what I was saying. And then eventually,
That's almost better.
right? Yeah, I mean totally, because it, you know, well. I mean, there are positives and
Yeah.
negatives, but eventually it got to the point where I tried. I think I tried several times, sort of like practicing my right to not involve myself in that practice, and I would just sort of like sit through the pledge.
Right.
Of course, I was the only one doing it, and nobody brought it up. Like nobody. I don't think I ever felt forced to
you
do
had
it.
Easy.
Yeah,
'Cause
maybe.
I did the same thing, and
Yeah.
it was like an ordeal
Yeah.
at the
Okay.
school.
Well, so yeah, I might have gotten
Yeah.
lucky in that I wasn't being forced to do it, but there is this intense social pressure to when everybody
Yeah.
stands up and goes to attention, and you're just like, I'm just gonna chill here in my seat. You know, it's like it's just hard to be that person.
Yeah, very.
You know what's also interesting is that the debate, there isn't a lot of it, but any debate you hear about around the Pledge of Allegiance in the U.S. is centered around the under God piece of it.
Yeah.
It's about the right to religious freedom, which I agree with that argument, but there's this whole other aspect to it also, right?
Yeah.
Which is like you're pledging that no matter what happens, no matter what we do, we're going to be loyal. And it's sort of like, well, really?
Yeah, do I really wanna-
Are we sure we're always good?
What if that happens?
Yeah, are we always? I'm not convinced we're the good guys.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
It's like some of the stuff is very, very shady that our country gets involved in, and you know, it's really kind of weird to say, yeah, I'm going to pledge my allegiance. It's a kind of bizarre thing,
Yep.
and that intense patriotism is something that other countries. I talked to other backpackers from, say, European countries or other places, and they find it really bizarre, the whole America thing, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, that's sort of
is.
a tenet of, you know, anarchist or objectivist philosophy is the idea of consistency, you know, and so as it applies here is most people in their daily life, if they see something that they don't agree with, they just don't associate with it. But then there's this weird like twisting of the rules, this house of mirrors that occurs where it's like, well, I guess I promised that I would always be loyal to my country. So whatever they do,
Right.
it must be right, and I must be wrong because they're the country, and I'm just some Joe Blow.
Yeah. I feel like
Right.
in other countries, I don't know, the ones that are popping to mind in particular are like Italy and France. The people there, they seem very devoted to their country, but it doesn't seem to be for nationalistic reasons as much as love
Right.
for the culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think so. The French backpackers tend to be the ones that hang out with other French people, for example.
Yeah.
And I guess, there is
I don't think that's a
I'm not-
problem. I'm
Yeah.
more saying the problem is when we attach ourselves to a national identity because they hate us for our freedom.
Yeah.
Or
Well, yeah, like that. So a French backpacker, for example, they like that culture, but exactly, it's not coming from a place of because France is the best place in
Right.
the world, and it's not coming from that angle.
Yeah.
This patriotism for France, it's coming from, hey, I like associating with other French people, and so
Right.
it's exactly that.
So I have a question about sort of the logistics of the backpacking thing. Do you? I mean, and maybe this is like too personal of a question, but
Go ahead.
But do you find what do you do for money? Do you just live off savings, or are you finding that you're being able to make money to move on to the next thing, or how does that work?
Good question. I was working in the quote unquote good job for 5 years, so I have some savings, but I also so one of the nice perks to this nice corporate job is when they moved me from the Washington D.C. area to Houston, they gave me a lot of assistance to purchase a home. So they kind of like covered settlement fee, the settlement fees and this and that and the other thing. So when I basically looked at it from a business perspective, and I was like, well, with all of these options stacked in my favor, I realized I could get a place with 3 bedrooms. I could rent out 2 of the rooms, and that would cover my mortgage payments essentially.
Right.
So I did that when I was still working that job, and then lo and behold, it turns out when I left the house, I could rent out my other room, and so now I kind of fell into a rental property of sorts.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me a terrible amount of money though. It doesn't make me very much money at all by U.S. standards.
Right.
But out here,
You don't need as much
the main
money,
thing
right?
is, the cost of living is so cheap compared to the U.S. For example, right now, actually, this is one of the more expensive living arrangements I have at under $7 a night.
Wow.
I'm used to paying under $5. I've paid $2 a night or under that
Wow.
before. Right now, so I'm paying $7 now, which is on the higher end, I'd say. And meals, though, I can get a meal for under $1. It's just, so the main way I'm supporting myself is just the fact that it is so much cheaper. So yes, I have a little bit of income, a little bit of passive income, but it's not really the thing that allows me to do this.
Right.
There are people, I happen to be in a good position, but other people I meet, other backpackers, there are people that don't have anything near that kind of a setup, and you can make it work just because it's so
So cheap.
it
right?
isn't expensive.
Yeah.
And so my idea now is I have some savings and a little bit of income that'll keep me kind of afloat while I am working on other businesses. And so by living somewhere like Southeast Asia, India, these kind of places, I allow myself the time to not be. I don't have to spend my time working a difficult, stressful job just to make ends meet.
Right.
I actually have the luxury of time, and I can devote that time to my business, starting something, so that eventually, I can actually be making some more money, but working for myself versus working for somebody else.
Yeah.
Is the idea.
That's very interesting. I mean, that's certainly. I think that's an enviable position. A lot of our listeners and people that I speak with, particularly in the what you might call the liberty movement, look at self-employment as kind of the gold standard as far as a living situation occurs. And there are in fact other podcast hosts. Anarchast, for example, comes to mind, where he pretty much is like a poster child, for this idea. You have your living situation down. How do you feel that your civil liberties are in other countries as compared to the U.S.? Do you feel more free, less free? How's the police presence? Is it heavy-handed?
As a foreigner in these countries, I feel more free than I did at home. I'm not as restricted. I think, although for the Thai people, for example, I don't think that they necessarily feel more free than American people, because there's a whole bunch of there's a lot of corruption. That's actually, I'm sure you guys have heard of all the stuff going on in Thailand now, the political unrest that's going on, and what's the reason for it is that the government in charge has been accused of corruption, essentially, and so there's this whole big struggle going on in Thailand around this issue. What's my kind of spin on it, though, is like, and Thailand is a country that, from the external perspective, there are things that are corrupt. There are, so police take bribes. So if, for example, you hear stories about, I've met backpackers who got caught with some weed. So what they do is they paid the police whatever amount of money it was, and then and that's how they resolve it. And that's just kind of a thing you hear about around these areas. So one example, and now so there's different things here. I don't agree with a war on drugs in the first place of arresting someone for smoking weed, but the other side of it is, so these officers of the law they don't even care about the law itself. They're just kind of like in it for themselves. So there's that angle. But on the other side, you look at, so on the surface, it's like, okay, you've got corruption, but I think the U.S. government, for example, is probably just as corrupt, but on a much more behind the scenes, maybe deeper level.
You make a good point that in the U.S. it does tend to be sort of like more hidden from us. Maybe it's a property of the governments because when you have more money to spend, you have more money to use to cover up your behavior. But it could also be sort of a property of the people and their ability to sort of deny the goings-on of their government.
There was an article about this just like maybe yesterday or the day before. I saw it on Vice, but I think a few different places have run the story. There was a study conducted where they concluded that the United States government is really more like an oligarchy than a democracy. And I don't know, I think it just comes down to the fact, look at how campaigns get financed, right? You have a lot of special interests and corporations and all kinds of that have their hands in the pot and are steering things. So yeah, we have elections, all this stuff, but I don't know, it's almost sort of like the conclusion of this article that I read was sort of like, and this study is that, those elections that we have don't necessarily make a difference when you got all this money,
right? It's just
behind the scenes pulling the strings.
Just a puppet show.
I will say one other thing though. So I don't. There's definitely this part of me that's let's look at the things in the U.S. that are wrong, because there are a lot of things that I see that are issues. Now at the same time though, in Thailand, if you make a joke about the king, that is illegal. So there are things that the liberties that they don't have here that we do have. So we have freedom of speech. So I can sit here on this podcast and I can shit on the U.S. government and I can feel hopefully secure that no one's going to come get me. Who knows in this day and age?
That's interesting. Well, so I guess what comes to my mind there is that there are varying levels of enforcement. So, for example, in Nazi Germany or in Stasi Poland, if you made a wisecrack about the government, it wasn't necessarily an issue of the police hearing you. You could be rooted out by your neighbor, by your own child. So I imagine it's, that level of enforcement doesn't exist in Thailand. Realistically, what is the threat there? Would you have to be overheard by a cop?
I
something like
actually
that?
don't know the answer. I haven't tested it myself.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's a promising answer right there. Then presumably you haven't seen anybody getting hauled out of a bar because they said something bad about the government.
I haven't seen anybody get hauled out of a bar for it. But I also haven't heard anybody make insults about the king either, right? Things that you do see, though. Okay, I have another example that came to mind. In a nearby city called Pai, you'll have some business, like say a guest house or a hostel. What happens is every month or two, the police will come around and basically shake them down for money. They'll come into their guest house and they'll find some reason why. They'll say, oh, well, you don't have a picture of the king in the right place, and shake them down and say, hey, you have to pay us or else we're going to arrest,
Wow.
That kind of thing also happens here. So it's not just people get caught smoking or whatever. It's, there's a lot of things that happen.
It's like more overtly mafia-like, I guess.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I think for sure on a surface level, it seems like, there's all this corruption because you can see it and it's there. And whereas ours is kind of the more subversive, hidden kind.
It's sleeker, yeah.
Yeah. The police are not taking bribes, usually not taking bribes in the U.S. Openly. With the, I guess that some do for sure, but
they don't have
it's
to
not
because
like
the government is taking the bribes for them
Right,
and paying them
exactly.
with unpayable pension plans and all that stuff.
It's like more convoluted.
Well, we have
Yeah.
I don't know. I look at campaign contributions from corporations to politicians as, what is that other than a bribe? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so it's
Our last episode was legalized bribery, and they our thesis was, hey, it's happening anyways. Why don't we just have it out in the open so nobody's deluding themselves
right.
that it's
Let's
not.
just at least be aware of it.
Exactly. Wow, that's interesting. So how does that compare to your other travels? You say you've been in Thailand, and before that you were in India. So
Yes.
that's interesting because I've heard that India is sort of notoriously corrupt. Was that your experience?
Yeah, definitely. It's similar kind of things that go on in India as well. The difference in India, I guess, is it's a lot cheaper to get. So people who get caught smoking pot in India can get by for a lot less rupees than they do baht.
Hey, Becky, I was having this dream the other night where I was taking a test and then all my teeth fell out and then everybody died.
Wow, Adam, that sounds pretty intense. But there are people who can help you interpret those.
Really? Where?
Well, during the last weekend in April, students from the School of Metaphysics, aided by professional dream coaches from dreamschool.org, will be fielding calls from around the world, answering questions about dreams and interpreting them for 54 hours straight.
Wow, how can I get in contact with them?
You can call them at 773-427-0155 from 6 p.m. Central Time on April 25th to midnight on April 27th with your dream questions.
Wow, I'm definitely going to do that. Where can I find more information?
They have a Facebook page called 26th Annual National Dream Hotline Weekend.
26th Annual National Dream Hotline Weekend. I'm definitely going to go to that Facebook page.
Good, it sounds like you have some real stuff to work out. I feel like we all sort of start this journey of waking up by realizing that there's all this corruption going on. But then I think we sort of start to evolve to realize that if we stop focusing on the corruption, we don't draw it to us as much. if you're focused on the corruption, then you're more likely to say bad things about the king, you know? But if you're just like, I'm going to just live my life and I'm not going to pretend that this government system has anything to do with my life, you start to realize that you do have more freedom and power than maybe you realized. Does that resonate with you at all?
I don't know if it's globally. I think maybe in a really grand scale. Yeah, in a deep, deep level, it could be globally applicable. I think there are aspects also so for somebody who is a citizen of some very like a very, very terribly corrupt regime. Let's say you're a Jew in Nazi Germany, for example, would be an example of where pretending that the issue's not there wouldn't necessarily help you. But I do see what you mean, though. I think there is a sense of it. There are certain systems that exist that you don't have to buy into, that you can just sidestep. And I think when possible, sidestepping is always better than attacking.
Right, because I feel like, when you try to attack, what you do is you just sort of make it bigger. Because like you said, we create our own enemies, and that's sort of how we do it, by fighting, by saying that's wrong and I don't want it to exist, and it flourishes.
Well, it's a cyclical escalation because it has to grow then to deal with you.
Right.
In the spirit of Gandhi, right? His whole thing was be the change you want to see in the world. So for India to gain its independence, rather than doing what has been done in most of human history prior and fighting, basically the approach there was let's do peaceful protesting, and they did this, and it worked, and Gandhi started to change. He did a thing that changed the world, right? Where it's what we talked about earlier in this episode, which is you want to. It goes back to Michael Jackson quotes too, right? If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. They're all saying the same kind of message, where we all each, rather than fighting against things that we don't agree with, pushing our views on others, and if each of us just makes ourselves an improved person over who we used to be, that's maybe the best thing we can do for the world.
I've actually had a lot of thoughts about this in the last week. My sense is that when you try to change the world outside of yourself, in particular, when you try to change people outside of yourself, if you're aware enough, I think you start to find that it's really a futile task, because people don't change unless they want to change. And that's just the reality of it. So if you're trying to change somebody, you eventually either have to let it go or employ force.
You made me think of the movie Inception, where they realized, we can't just, make this guy think what we want him to think. He has to come to the realization himself. And so I think that's generally true. It's like people have to come to their own conclusions, their own worldviews. Nobody can force someone to think any particular way. Every individual is a sovereign individual that must make his own choices. And I think maybe a thing that is healthy that's happening now in the world is there's so much more communication happening, and this podcast is an example of that. It's like, let's have the dialogues, and I try to do this with my show as well. It's like, let's just have more dialogues, and the internet has just revolutionized that, because now we have the communication happening, and we're in its infancy. Communication's happening. It's like if the world, the global world is just one brain. It's like you hit a switch all of a sudden, and it can now communicate 100 times faster than it used to. And we are just if you look at human history, or the globe's history for that matter, it's like we are just in the infancy of this new age of communication happening so much faster.
And it's only accelerating, which is incredible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately that's a good thing. So you can't impose on other people views, but I think with more and more and more communication and ideas being passed around, the truth and the good and the just, I think ultimately, inevitably, is going to have to rise up above all the others. Yeah,
and I think the reason that that's true is because when you are sort of, to use a word that I don't know if you would use this word, but when you're emanating love, you attract people, right? And when your mental processes are all based in fear, you're repelling people. And when you attract people, you're way more powerful than someone who's just pushing everyone away. Because if you're just totally separated from everyone, you only have whatever power is in your physical human body, right? But when you bring people together with love, it doesn't take much, and then you're way more powerful than the people who are fighting the world alone, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I think, there's a lot of people out there that have, again, kind of like things talked about earlier with the spirituality thing. They have this knee-jerk reaction to the idea of your energy. Like, it's like, oh, what is this hippie bullshit talking about your energy? But it's a real, actual thing that's happening. Forget about like fields of magic. What I'm talking about is like, what's your mental attitude? Is your mental attitude one that's positive or one that's negative? And if you have a positive mental attitude, you are acting positive towards other people, and you're damn right it's going to affect them. And if you have a negative mental attitude, that's going to be reflected also in the people around you. So you literally are building the world around yourself with your mental position. So whether it's not coming from a place, it's not, when we talk about energy, it's not magical things happening. It's just you are affecting people around you with your actions. It's cause and effect. So you do have, in that sense, energy. It's just it's a model for describing that kind of effect.
I would agree with everything that the both of you just said, and I think that the idea of communicating your emotional state to the world and having a positive emotional state, that dovetails very nicely with the Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world, and also the idea of peaceful resistance as a way of not aggrandizing the negative structures in society. And I am truly amazed at the many channels that this tactic can take. We're right at the very beginning of just this ability to communicate on such a rapid and grand scale. One of the cutting edge ways that that's coming out is through the communication of value, through the communication of price and trade. And so, for example, I was just made aware of a new project happening in Afghanistan. And the idea is that it's going to be paying in a decentralized global way female bloggers. And so the idea there is that, they'll be able to be paid in cryptocurrency anonymously for the message that they're able to put out. And so not only are they able to put out this message anonymously, which protects them from retribution if they have unpopular beliefs in their culture, but also, from what I understand, women, especially young women, are basically not allowed to have money. It will be pretty much be confiscated for them, and they have no legal recourse. Whereas this new forum of communication, and by that I mean cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, which is a form of communications, communicates value, really allows to free people around the world. And that's a form of nonviolent resistance that I think we're just seeing the beginning of.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And another kind of like manifestation of the increasing connectedness around the world is that the younger generations, I feel like, are, if you look globally around the world, like teenagers are the same all around the world now. It didn't used to be that way, right? It used to be that everybody was sort of very affected by their own local culture. And so, teenagers in Russia had certain mannerisms or behaved in certain ways. And teenagers in Iraq had their way. But I feel like now with the internet and with this sort of there's a global culture that's arising, and it's much more connected. And so I feel like younger people are feeling more and more like, well, I mean, I don't want to go and bomb those people. They're the same as me.
People choose peaceful, voluntary modes of action when they're given the choice, when they see that there is another option, when they're not indoctrinated, to put their hand over their heart and pledge allegiance to the flag.
Yeah.
They'll 9 times out of 10, they'll pick the peaceful, voluntary route.
I really, really am hopeful and optimistic that as humanity moves forward in this new age, that is something we're going to see. And it's another aspect of it is, and this is an idea I'm stealing from Joe Rogan. I don't know if you guys listen to his show, but he talks about this a bunch, where we're heading as a society towards this place where, along with the more communication, there's also less privacy. And it's certainly something that's uncomfortable when you hear about the NSA spying on us. It's like, what what gives here, right? But at the same time, you wonder what Joe Rogan's argument is if in a world where there's less privacy, not just the NSA knows your secrets, but where everyone knows everyone's secrets, there's no longer any such thing as secrets. There's no longer, people are understanding more of each other.
It becomes more of like a telepathic kind of society, I feel like.
Yeah, and who knows what the mechanism is going to be, whether it's some, the future and technology, your crystal ball is as good as mine. But we are, if you look at the direction we're moving at a very startling pace towards a society where there is less and less and less and less privacy. Mm-hmm. And so it's, for me, my answer is, all right, well, I'll embrace it. Bear it all on podcasts and that kind of thing.
Give up all your secrets.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right with that, Mike. Well, hey, I really want to thank you for joining us today on Peace Propaganda. And you want to give out your information for the listeners so they know where to find you and follow the brilliant work that you're doing?
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been an awesome pleasure. It's a really fun time actually talking with you guys.
Yeah, you too.
So you can find our show, Walking the Earth Podcast, facebook.com/Walking the Earth Podcast. On Twitter, we're at WTE Podcast. The show itself is available on iTunes. It's also on Stitcher if you're an Android user, or good old SoundCloud. So you can get the URL, soundcloud.com/Walking the Earth Podcast. So those are all of the different ways you can find us. If you want to follow me also on Twitter, I'm at Mike Margulies, Margolies.
And of course, we'll have all of those links in our show notes for our listeners. So if you weren't taking notes, don't worry. You can find all of the contact information for Walking the Earth Podcast in the Peace Propaganda show notes.
And both of our podcasts are on Podcast Land, so you can go ahead over there and give us some votes.
Please. You're allowed to vote for as many podcasts as you want. It's just one vote per person per podcast per month. So you can vote for Peace Propaganda and Walking the Earth. All happy. If you like my show also, vote for me.
I'm sure our listeners would love your show. So, again, thanks so much, Mike.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was actually awesome.
I hope you enjoyed our interview with Mike Margulies from Walking the Earth Podcast. He does a really great show over there. You should check it out. Just a quick programming note. Since this was a double shot of Peace Propaganda, we're not going to have a show for you on Wednesday, but be sure to come back on Saturday for the next episode. We'll see you then.